Pipe Network presents.
On this episode of Season 4, Let's Talk.
I can't really trace it to this one special moment in childhood, but I would remember when I started joining essay writing contests in college. I like the feeling of writing something and ending it with like a really strong line that moves you, when you read it. I like reading something and feeling that same feeling. And I wanted to do it over and over, and have that piece impact at least one person. So I discovered that feeling of fulfillment there and just, I kept replicating it. I kept doing it and found that, okay, this is something I'm quite good at, right? It's something I can excel in. Yeah, so I guess it just builded from there.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Rajiv Show, and I'm your host Rajiv Doreswamy. And this show aims to help reach out to those who are currently struggling in life and to remind you that life is indeed beautiful when you're inspired to make it your own. Before we get into this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to whichever platform you are using. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok at The Rajiv Show. Hey, folks, welcome back to The Rajiv Show. And, folks, let me introduce to you my guest today, Rose Barroga. Rose, how are you doing, girl?
I'm good. I'm good. It's right now as we're recording this, it's February 4. So things are going well, at least for the first few weeks of 2021. So that's great. Yeah, just same old productive days. That's how I define a good week. So it's been good. How are
That's
you?
good. As usual, productive. Prior to the recording, folks, for those who are listening, I haven't done a recording in the series of 2021 ever since I wrapped up my December series. So this is like my second or my third take of recordings, and it's fun to be back again, speaking and sharing my stuff. So I want to build a foundation of getting to know you, and of course, my listeners would love to get to know you. Could you give a little bit of background to my listeners about who you are?
All right. How do I start? I usually start by telling people that I'm a storyteller. Okay. So right now I'm 24 years old. I spent most of my working life in a newsroom because my background is journalism. So I worked in the newsroom for over 3 years. I was a TV news writer, so I would write scripts for a TV show. My main show was a morning show. It's called Early Edition. So I would wake up at 3 a.m. and write new scripts every day. On the side, I was also a segment producer. So I used to produce a lot of segments, most of them leaning to like hopeful, progressive, positive human interest stories. So that's who I am. That's what I do. I'm a storyteller. I like telling stories that have a positive impact on society. But, because of the pandemic, I left the newsroom job and now I work for this channel or content page called Project Nightfall. And the mission is the same. We also release stories that inspire people, have an impact on the world. And it's viewed by tens of millions of people every day. So that's what I do. That's who I am.
Wow. I mean,
That's it.
this is interesting right off the bat. This is really interesting. Storyteller, I would relate to you much because the experience of doing a podcast, I think, for me, I'm not much at the vlogging thing. I'm not really much at the in front of the
Mhm.
camera. I did try it
Right.
out. It was not really my jam. And then when I found podcasting, and then I learned the game, I built my foundation and how podcasting is. And I learned that to get enough good listeners or authentic stories, it comes from that expression as storytelling. So this is really interesting. This is going to be a fun conversation. But before we get into the stuff that you unraveled here, storytelling, TV news writer, script writer, I want to take time travel. Let's travel back in time. I want to ask. I mean, I think you're 1 year younger than me, so I think we're in the same batch of the high school. If you and I were high school classmates, who were you in high school? Are you the girl who is into the books, sports, valedictorian, or back of the class? Who were you in high school if you and I were classmates?
Okay, you you mentioned books. People assume that when you're a writer, for a living, you were a bookworm in high school or you were the nerd. But
Yeah.
the case for me is I wasn't a bookworm. I'm not proud of this, by the way. I wasn't a bookworm because my friends were not bookworms. So we weren't the nerds in the class, but I was, I don't know, maybe I see myself differently, and
Huh.
maybe my friends would say something else, but I think I was one of those fun groups. I was in the fun group. I
Hmm.
was the clown in the class, I guess.
Hmm.
But I wasn't exceptionally great. I wasn't on top of class, but I would excel in some subjects. I was the person that they would send to essay writing contest. That was a
Hmm.
predictable part about me being a writer. But the rest was very, there wasn't anything special, but I was a funny, not cool, but like funny, above average kid, I guess.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
The follow up to that is would you consider yourself introverted, extroverted, inverted, or ambiverted? I mean, those are the stuff that I know which classifies personalities.
Right. Okay. My MBTI says I'm an extrovert because when I would answer the quiz, I always end up being an extrovert, but deep inside, I feel like I'm introvert. So I feel I'm an ambivert, if that's a thing.
Yeah.
Um, but leaning to extroversion, I think, leaning to extroversion. But if I spend too much time with people outside, I get drained. So
Hmm.
I think I'm an ambivert. Or what I think also is another possibility is that I grew up as an introvert, but I learned how to be an extrovert for my job as a journalist. Because,
Hmm.
as a journalist, as a storyteller, you have to learn how to talk to people, you have to interview people. So I kind of just tried to learn that during college, how to be an extrovert. Like
Hmm.
it's part of my job, and I can just switch it on and off. Like during interviews, I switch it on. I become an extrovert all of a sudden. But if you leave me alone, like I would prefer talking to a friend in a cafe rather than hanging out at a bar, at a club. So I feel like ambivert is the short answer. I feel like I'm an ambivert.
It's interesting. You mentioned journalism. I want to fast forward from high school, building that off, and transitioning into college. You mentioned writing and stuff. When did the fire for when did the spark for writing come about? When you started getting into journalism or thing? Is there a story behind that?
Mhm. Nice, yes. Um, hmm. I can't really trace it to this one special moment in childhood, but I would remember when I started joining essay writing contests in college.
Hmm.
I like the feeling of writing something and ending it with like a really strong line
Hmm.
that moves you, when you read it. I
Hmm.
like reading something and feeling that same feeling. And I wanted to do it over and over, and have that piece impact a at least one person. So I discovered that feeling of fulfillment there, and just, I kept replicating it. I kept doing it, and found that, okay, this is something I'm quite good at, right?
Mm.
It's something I can excel in. Um yeah, so I guess it just builded from there. It just builded from there. I studied in a public high school, and
Mm.
there you would interact with people from different social classes, So
Mm.
that also, I think, opened my eyes to reality.
Mm.
Um, that there's inequality, although so that there's social injustice. So high school, I think it was high school that started this like fire to want change, to maybe use writing as a tool to affect change. So yeah,
It's interesting.
pretty much there.
Interesting. And I
That's
have
your
a
fifth.
feeling.
That's your sixth interesting.
Yeah, for those who are counting, I mean, thank you for counting along. It is fascinating. Yeah, I used the substitution now, which is fascinating. Uh, you come from a public high school, and then the concept of writing. But when you got into college, was there? I'm sure, like some of us who are starting out from high school and building into college life, did you know that you wanted to get to where you wanted to be, or you? Because I think the current generation that we're living in a generation where I don't know if you agree with me, is that a large couple of kids are getting confused as to what they want to pursue in college, and sometimes when they make that mistake, it becomes a regret, and then it passes on to generation and generation. But in terms of your story,
Mm.
did did you know that, okay, I did writing in high school, and I built up the reputation in that regard, and then I want to pursue this in and go further in journalism, or you had to shift, you had to start from somewhere, and then eventually you landed on journalism.
Right. Okay. So I was only able to trace that, everything I said earlier, I was just able to trace that in hindsight.
Hmm.
But when I entered college, I also had no idea what exactly I wanted to do. I had that vague, um, yeah, like what I said, I had that vague idea that, okay, I wanted to write and I
Hmm.
wanted to make change. Those are very vague concepts. But
Hmm.
somehow, when I saw AB journalism written on like the course list, I don't
Hmm.
know, I felt lured into it. I felt like it made sense that that was a way to do what I wanted to do, but
Hmm.
I wasn't sure because the other choice that I also wrote down was architecture. It was
Hmm.
so
Oh
far from
wow.
journalism.
That's
Like my
like
top,
that's like from China to America, and like, wow, that's very far
yeah.
off.
And the funny thing is the only reason I wrote architecture because I was good at geometry. I was in
Oh
high
boy.
school and just someone told me that if you're good at geometry, then it makes sense. So, okay, architecture. But
Geometry,
yeah,
huh?
I ended up in
Interesting.
journalism.
Isn't that where you find X and then you forget about Y? Is that the
That,
geometry, or that's, oh no, that's algebra.
that's algebra.
That's
That's
wrong
algebra.
number. uh, it's funny. Sometimes some stereotypical stuff that I've learned is that when you're an Indian, you're good in maths, and it all goes back to this.
Engineering.
Yeah, engineering, maths, nursing. There's this funny part where someone found a YouTube clip about kids, flipping their fingers, and they're beating a calculator. So they were putting down numbers, and I'm sure I don't know if you've seen this. Where the kids they give a particular number, and then they add and minus, and then they just flip their wrists as though they were counting, and then they would come up with the numbers within 5 seconds, and it's accurate to the calculator, which is kind of interesting again. So
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen that though. You got to check it out. I don't know if it's still on YouTube though. But yeah, that's the one thing that I know of when it comes to Indians and maths. And sadly, I am not one in that department. I'm the only Indian who's so bad in maths. Even I don't even know how to explain that myself. But yeah, I just say the word interesting as a main guideline to that.
So what did your parents say? Like,
um, in my regard, for my story, life was much more different because a little bit of background, of course. When I grew up here in the Philippines, and until fifth grade, we call it standard in India. So it's a different. We call it grade here. We call it standard there. And in fifth grade, of
mm,
course, that was somewhere around 2005. My dad migrated to India, and then my grandmother, who named me, who was a big fan of the Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, named me, wanted to see me. So the plan was initially was to go to India and to meet her. And it so happened by the time that we reached India, it was sad because my grandmother passed away the very day that we arrived, or few months or few days when we arrived. So we had no choice but to settle in, and from 2005 till 2015, I was there. My sister and my mother stayed till 2008. And that's where the story
mm,
began. So basically, when I grew up here in the Philippines, I had a different taste of being sort of like a foreigner in another country because of my name and all that stuff. But then I was
mm,
more Filipino when I was here when I was younger. But when I went to India, it was much more different. This is where it got interesting because the people, the culture, it's just when you're entering this new world, it's very. I don't know how to explain it. It's like you're entering a new realm. It's like if you know comics, you're entering Valhalla or something. If you know the if you know the term,
mhm,
you're entering a new realm, and the cultures and things are different. And for from 2005 till 2015, I've submerged into that culture. So some of the small tiny details, like things that my dad do, you know those tiny details, those kind of the Indian texture, as we call it, has kind of rubbed off on me. But the funny
mm,
part is I haven't managed to get adapt my tongue to the Indian dishes. So it is, forgive my language here, but it's a pain in the ass when I go to dinner in an Indian restaurant because I'm the only
mhm.
Indian who does not eat Indian food. It's kind of funny. I want it with some super sweet and stuff like that. So that's that's a little bit of a story from my end. And I kind of deviated from the question, is that when it came to
Which
college,
didn't answer my question.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm answering the question. I'm just giving you a basic foundation. And coming back to my choice when it came to college, I come from a generation of musicians. My dad's a musician, my mom is a musician. I grew up in a different STEM. I'm more of a comic book kind of guy, arts, writing not really, but drawing. That's
Mhm,
more of my forte when I was young. And moving forward, when
mhm,
I came back 2015, I kind of missed when I was here in Baguio. I kind of missed the opportunity to get into art school, which initially was my plan. So my backup course of action was music. So that's when I joined music school, and then I studied 5 years. And apparently, a few months ago, we just finished our graduation, which is 5 years. And
mm,
supposedly it's supposed to be 4 years, but yeah, I graduated 5 years because I had some few problems during one of the years. And yeah, I'm a music graduate, and that's the thing. That's the life, basically. I hope I answered the question clear enough, though.
yeah, yeah. Do you like any regrets or
in
looking back?
there are so many that I can pinpoint, and probably that would be like an entire season. but to give you give you two or three points, the most regretful thing I've had is that never gotten to enjoy my. I think I mentioned this in also an episode earlier. Is that I kind of never had that enjoyment of the moment, enjoying the moment of the graduation. You know the feeling of being there in the moment, being in the moment when you're in the stage or whatever it is that the graduations are held at. I never had that chance, and that is one of my regrets. When I had my high school, I failed my eighth grade or eighth standard. We call it eighth standard there, and then I had to opt up for open schooling, and I never had that
Mhm.
opportunity because my sister, she graduated, and when she graduated it was more like a different take because apparently during that time I never was never allowed to enjoy that moment with my sister, and I think it was, I don't know what the reason was, but I felt that I really wish that I would have at least enjoyed and internalized that because I enjoy moments like that, where you're in the pedestal and then thing. It so happened that the
Mm.
same story comes with the graduation that I mentioned earlier, which was of course because we're living in a pandemic. That's we had to do a
Mhm.
virtual graduation. The funny part about that is I didn't even expect. I just got a last minute notification somewhere in my Facebook that our names were already mentioned, and oh, that was the graduation. So yeah, I never got the opportunity to enjoy that moment, take in that moment, that when you finally made it, and with your comrades and all the other thing. I kind of, those are my one of my biggest regrets in life, but that's yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
mhm. You can see it as either a regret or like a special quality to it. Like imagine after this pandemic, you'll be one of the few with that story, with that pandemic graduation story, and that makes it unique, I guess.
Yeah. No, but to me, the point that I'm trying to make there is it's that when you enjoy something, let's say, let's put this into a simpler context. When you're having fun with your friends, you don't think about it logically when you're having a conversation, especially when you lock horns with an interesting conversation that's something about psychology or philosophy or something deep within that regard. It's like you're in that moment, and your logical sense doesn't say that, oh no, you need 1 hour, 2 hours. Even if you guys go for an hour or so, more than an hour or so, you still have that ability of keeping the conversation interesting, and that the tiny split second between those moments that you spend with your friends, that's the same thing in a larger extent to what I feel when what I really wanted from that moment. Granted that I never got it in high school, I thought that that would be the same thing that I would at least recover from. At least I could get that back, that moment that I missed from high school into college.
Mm.
But so happens, this happened, and there's nothing much we can do about it.
Mhm.
So yeah, but yeah, in one way, you have a very valid point. I do agree with your saying your point as well. So yeah. uh,
Interesting.
I like that. I like that. Um, Before I get into storytelling, TV news writer and script writer, I wanna dig deep into your personal characteristics. Are you a kind of person who digs? I mean, as a writer, I'm sure the art of writing digs deep into the story of lives, where in a conversation and gossip, you only see it in the skin. But once you have like the idea of doing research and getting into the details, you're getting to be a part of that person, especially when you guys are doing, I don't know if you guys do this, but you study the biography of the person, especially when you're interviewing them and regards. I want to dig deep into your life as well. I hope you don't mind. Is that, do you have a particular philosophy, Rose? Barroga philosophy that you live by every day, to get you fired up for the day or for the week or for the year, for that matter?
I guess it's more of like a concept. No,
Hmm.
not a concept, like a trait that I hold on to.
Hmm.
Um, it's resilience. Resilience. Because I feel like my life is like my personal life is dramatic enough. I'm not
Hmm.
sure how much I can reveal, but yeah, I've always looked back and saw everything as me being resilient. And when something bad happens, I remind myself, okay, I've gone through a lot. I'm resilient. I can go through this. Right. So yeah, I think it's resilience always. Like whatever life throws at me, somehow it ends up I end up being fine.
Hmm.
So maybe that's like the principle that I hold on to. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I gotta admit, you are such a fascinating person. I mean, for the first time meeting people, it's very hard. Sometimes I have tendencies of breaking the ice faster than it even melts. It's funny. I look at life the way we see it is that w- for those who are stronger enough alone and have built that foundation of being together with themselves, it's really rare. I mean, in a uh, world that is now changing with the pandemic, and before the pre-pandemic, a lot of people go through identity crisis, and this is going to be a little bit philosophical. And with all the things that are going on, clanging and banging, social media and social circles, cliques, and all these stuff, once person's identity is one of the biggest burdens in life. And then once they find the inner peace that contradicts the society around them, that also becomes a challenging. So I think we're all fighting the same battles that we all uh, have internally and externally. And it's a fascinating thing about human beings is that we all have different ways of coping and bringing the best out of what we do in life. I'm sorry, but
Mm.
that's the thing. That's my response to
Yeah, yeah.
reality and saying, especially now with this challenge. Like I said, this challenge.
Yeah, I was saying it's interesting you said that inner peace and all that. That's something I learned from myself during the pandemic. Everyone was forced to just sit by themselves, be alone, not go out and be distracted.
Hmm.
Just sit with yourself in peace. And lately I've been into mindfulness.
Hmm.
I've been doing at least guided meditations in the morning, and I've learned that about myself. I've also opened up that part of me that's just, okay with sitting quietly, doing nothing. Because, like I said, I used to be in the newsroom world, and
Hmm.
that world was so fast paced,
Yeah.
adrenaline rush every time, so busy, always on call, that busy world. And I was workaholic, really, like a lot.
Hmm.
I would take just one day off in a week.
Hmm.
I'm not supposed to work on Saturdays because the morning show doesn't air on Saturday, but I would still go out in the field and shoot something because I don't know. I felt like during those times I was equating my
Huh.
self-worth to
Huh.
productivity. And I only learned that it was toxic later on when I left the newsroom world. But yeah, that's who I was. So
Huh.
this pandemic, I'm lucky enough to work for a team that values mental health, work-life balance. And
Hmm.
now I'm realizing that um it's okay to just sit by yourself and have nothing to do, and treat that as um time not wasted, right? I also realized this when I watched Soul. Have you watched Soul,
Oh
Pixar
yes. Oh
movie?
yes. Oh yes.
Yeah, so like wow, I was always that like passionate, purposeful person who just preaches it, follow your passion, blah blah,
Yeah.
hustle.
Spoiler
But
alerts for those who
after that, I
haven't seen the movie. You gotta go see the movie.
right.
This is
Sorry,
not a sponsored
please
show,
see the
but
movie.
yeah, you gotta go see the movie. Soul, Jamie Foxx. I'm just
It
gonna say it till
it's
there.
just right. It's just so life changing for me. I was like, okay, I should just live. That leaf on your hand, like that image. I should just do that. So yeah, just wanted to share like that a big realization for me during the pandemic. Like inner peace, mindfulness, embracing life as it is, embracing the negatives,
Hmm.
learning that my emotions are neutral. There are no bad or good emotions.
Hmm.
Embracing sadness, embracing anxiety, because they all serve a function, for you to know yourself. So yeah.
I've always had this question that since you mentioned newsroom, I've always wanted to. You mentioned fast pace in newsroom. I'm sure you've had some funny stories in the newsroom where you went, "Oh, that just happened to me." Could you share some funny
Mm.
stories? I hope, if you don't mind, share some interesting stories of the life in the newsroom, because I can't really visualize the idea of it being fast paced, because I only have limited knowledge to how the news life is, if that's the word for it. Do you have some
Mm.
interesting stories you want to share?
Let me try to think of a funny story, but just to give you a picture of what the newsroom life is. So there's the newsroom with like all the desks, writers sitting side by side,
Hmm.
editors are there, and there's also another room. It's called the control room,
Hmm.
where everything basically happens. Everyone behind the scenes is there. So I would stay in the control room. So if you look at me at 3 a.m.,
Hmm.
you'll just see me running back and forth between my computer and my producer. And we would just shout at each other
Oh.
because, especially if there's breaking news. So a lot of shouting, a lot of running for me
Hmm.
from my desk to the graphic artist desk, because I also manage the graphics.
Hmm.
Yeah, a lot of sometimes cursing from the producer. So as you can imagine, a very stressful environment. But also, you know, there's also a lot of adrenaline rush. So that's the reason people stay also, despite the stress. There's the adrenaline rush, the fulfillment, of course, that you're helping people with your job. So that's what it looks like. Very, I don't know, like the one you see in Hollywood, it,
Hmm.
it looks like that in real life. Funny story, I'm not sure if there's a funny story, but you know, maybe silly mistakes like
Yeah.
in graphics.
Hmm.
We have you've lived in the Philippines. We have a department called DOLE, right?
Eh,
DOLE,
yeah.
Department of Labor and Employment.
Correct. Correct.
So my
Dole.
graphics artist,
Hmm.
right, instead of putting the logo for DOLE,
Hmm.
he put the logo for DOLE, the pineapple drink.
Oh
And it
man.
got flashed on, it's a cable news channel, right? So it got
Oh
flashed on
boy.
international TV.
Oh boy.
So you can imagine a lot of cursing, and I don't know how that got through, but people are busy.
Huh.
Some people haven't slept at all. So that's just the life of live TV. So that's the only thing I remember. I'm sure there are other stupid mistakes, but yeah, that's
Like,
live TV for you.
the dole that I know of is the pineapple circle thingy, right? Is that the one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Oh
instead
man.
of
Sorry for the
so yeah, a
maniacal
lot of
laugh.
face palm.
Yeah,
Nice.
I'm actually in that position
It's
right now.
valid. It's valid.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like that's the worst. Interesting and worse. I hope.
I mean, you could get fired for that. You should get fired for something like that, right? But
But what happened
I'm
afterwards?
glad
Did
he didn't get fired.
the guy got away with it, or
Well,
he?
um, what happens is, I usually write an incident report because
Huh.
they report to me. Yeah, just that. But they can't afford firing a guy who has worked for them and knows all the rules. So what happens is
Ah.
just incident report, meeting after post mortem. So
Oh wait. So
yeah, it's we can't just
technically,
fire people.
you were a junior in that office or that studio at that time, or an intern or something like that.
It's no. Well, it's a small team,
Yeah.
so we it's normal to juggle a lot of roles. So
Huh.
during that time, I was a script writer.
Huh.
I was also a segment producer for the segment within the show,
Yeah.
and also the graphics supervisor, I guess. So they just asked me to supervise the graphics, check the
Wow.
data, blah blah. So yeah, so that just slipped. I, maybe I was working on something else, and that got flashed on national
Man, I can't
international TV.
imagine.
So
I can't imagine the cursings and all
yeah,
that
so
you've gotten from that thing. Wow.
yeah, you get used to it. You get used to it.
Uh, I hope
So
I hope
if you've survived the newsroom life,
the I hope
you
the
you can
person
survive anything.
who underwent the shoutings and all that stuff. I hope he's not tuning into this episode. It'd be embarrassing, probably. Oh, that's me, kind of moment. But that's really a wow, interesting, fast paced. Wow, I can't believe it. I'm actually learning a lot in this regard. This is amazing. This is an amazing, phenomenal conversation.
I just want to say people forget that there are actually a whole team behind an anchor. I'm surprised sometimes when people say that they thought it's only an anchor saying things on cue, impromptu.
Yeah.
They don't realize that there are people writing the script, that there are people directing the cameras, you know,
Huh.
people make the graphics and all that. So yeah,
It's
go ahead.
really fascinating. It's fascinating. I'd love to continue this conversation, but folks, we need to have a short break. We'll be right back after these few short messages.
I like to have a good time when I listen to my horror podcast.
Her left arm
Oh,
was
that's
chopped
so.
off,
Oh my god,
caused
really?
a panic all over the
Prolonged
country.
their deaths for like months and
The
months.
frightening, alarming, real-life tales show is my horror podcast.
My horror podcast.
That's
Give
it.
pause it.
This is your scary part. Be scared and laugh hard with the frightening, alarming, real-life tales show every Friday on all major podcasting platforms. Don't say I didn't warn you.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the Rajiv Show, and my guest, the one and only, the beautiful Rose Barroga. And earlier on the first half of this conversation, we were talking about storytelling, news writer. I shared a little bit of my life as well, and it's if we were to put it in one word, basically, it would be my signature word, which is interesting. So, I want to move forward in this conversation. I want to open this conversation to something that you've done recently, which I am actually a big fan of as of the moment, is change. Your motivation for change, which is funny, which is also the same motivation for the Rajiv show. Um, I I gotta ask, how did you find these guys? What's the story behind that? You know, was it an internal thing first, then you found these guys, or how did you find these guys that you were working with? The Nightfall project. Am I right?
Project Nightfall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Okay. Right. So, just to introduce Project Nightfall, if you're familiar with Nas Daily, the guy who is Project Nightfall is his best friend. So that's also how I found him. But so the job opportunity opened up in, when was that? I think August or July
Hmm.
2020. So during that time, there was already an issue with my TV news with my TV network, because my like I said, my cable news channel, I worked for a cable news channel, but that cable news channel was under like this bigger umbrella that
Hmm.
is a leading media giant here in the Philippines,
Okay.
ABS-CBN, I think I can say it. So there was a shutdown issue, some things going on in Congress, and that mother network was shut down.
Hmm.
So effectively, all the workers in my channel then, the cable news channel, um, their jobs were also endangered. So I started looking for other jobs during that time.
Hmm.
Um, and that's when I found this job posting for Project Nightfall. So um, yeah, I just applied. They asked me to submit a script, a sample script. When I read the description of what they were looking for, it felt really like it was made for me. Like not bragging about it, but it really felt like it was written for me specifically,
Hmm.
because it said like Filipino scriptwriter.
Hmm.
And in the description, everything they said there, I was like, okay, wow, this is a perfect fit. Like it's so perfect that if I don't get it, it feels like injustice, like
Hmm.
I really felt that way. So I applied for it and submitted a script. um it was on Zoom. It was a Zoom interview with
Hmm.
Aegon. And yeah, just it went so fast. That same day they offered me the job, that same day. And from there, just everything just went by so fast. Yeah, and now I feel like I think I could describe it as like the perfect job for me. Like I could stay here forever. I'm at that point in my life. I feel like I'm already living the dream, because this is what I want. I just want to tell stories
Hmm.
and change lives with it. And I think with the reach, it's happening already. So also the question that comes after that is what's next, right? After
Yeah.
you've gotten your dream, what's next? That's why soul resonated with me a lot. What's next? What's next? So
Hmm.
yeah, I forgot your question. How did I meet them? Yeah, I
Yeah.
answered it.
Fascinating. It's really, really fascinating. That's the one thing I really admire. I respect people who who are taking who are taking the route of change in times, in times of craziness and madness. Um,
Mm,
and I don't want to remind others that um, the year before us, I'm not gonna name it. The year before us, prior to this recording, was really tough. Basically, it was tough for a lot of people. I've met a lot of people who lost more than their senses when it came to reality changing, and now the fact that we are
for sure.
living in the era of change. Eventually, once this thing dies down, it's gonna be an interesting way to see how we are gonna recover, and I think the old ways are gonna change. So that the
Yeah.
main highlight of the things that I've said that I repeated in consecutive terms, aside from interesting, is of course change, which is I think one of our both are my goal for the Rajiv show, and also for Rose's mission and vision. Not just of course to one project, but I'm sure a lot of projects are gonna come your way, and hopefully. I mean, I do believe. I mean, I know I met you for the first time, and from all the things that you're doing that you said you never wanted to mention, I guess use that as a fire to fuel yourself, and then I think you'll be on your way. I believe you'd rise above the expectation and still kick ass, and I hope that's okay for you for me to say it. But yeah, it's really really cool, and is yeah.
That's very kind. I appreciate it. And I can say the same thing to you. I the reason I said yes to this is I always have respect for people who create, I don't know, who just create, who create content, who create value in society, even if it's a stranger. I say yes. I always say yes to people. So the same respect goes back to you. Just keep doing it.
Cheers. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so
I wanted to
much.
say
Yeah.
something. You
Yeah.
mentioned, yeah, you mentioned how the last year has been, of course, it's changed lives in a negative way for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I know this because my other passion project called Tales of the New Normal
Hmm.
tried to document this because it was such a crazy year. So I tried to document it by interviewing people from across the world, ask about their story, make it into a 1 minute video. So
Hmm.
that was another project on the side. Now the format is IGTV, which I think you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know how hard it is. I've talked to people who lost loved ones, lost their jobs. So it's weird to, I don't know, for me to be doing so well in a
Yeah.
time that's so crazy. So there's a certain guilt in that, like, why am I doing so well? It feels so wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that certain realization, but I've learned to like own it. It's not my fault, and
Hmm.
I've worked hard for it. So um I don't know why I said that. I just wanted to, why did I say that? I forgot, but yeah.
And
Like, I feel like other people could relate. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, to my regard as well, I the reason why I resonated well with you is not just the fact that you're a storyteller, and the last thing you said was actually true. I mean, a lot of people got hit, got dent, and then coming to think of it, you kind of put it into perspective that I didn't expect to see it that way. Now, looking at it that in that perspective is that I kind of have the. I think I'm also sharing the same guilt as to how am I still
Mm,
alive, and others are struggling in order to get back to their feet. And I kind of got taken back by that. That's actually kind of powerful and had me thinking. Normally, I never thought of things like that. It's I think being
mm,
isolated alone shows that you know uh, it's more of me, and then sometimes it's more on the internals, and sometimes we need to also look
mm.
outside to compare what's happening, but not to be a part of it, in the sense that we get absorbed by it, we lose our own identity. I don't know if it makes sense. I'm
Right.
getting very
Mm,
deeply philosophical. All of these thoughts happen to me, and is that I've spent a lump sum of years from 2008 to 2015. This goes back to my storytelling. For those who haven't listened to my podcast, I share a particular era in my life called the lost years, which is the isolation years where I was isolated from the world. So a lot of these philosophical thoughts and thinkings have come to that. That's why I'm very bit introspective. So yeah.
because people say that right now it's insensitive to celebrate your wins in life when the rest of the world is pretty much suffering,
Hmm,
even dying. But someone told me that we don't have to feel guilt when we're winning
hmm,
at this point in time, because again, you've earned that, right? It's not, maybe you're lucky also, but you've earned that. You've worked hard for that, and we shouldn't feel guilty. And along, I guess, if you still feel guilty,
hmm.
then maybe use your power right now to impact other people, right? Like what you're doing with your podcast. Things are going well for you, but you can still use this good energy, this productive energy, to helping other people right now who are struggling. So there's a way to still add value in this world, to like use that guilt productively, I guess. Create content, create value for other people.
Man, you are such a
That's it.
powerful. I mean, I gotta admit, from all the first, this is the first time I'm having a conversation with you. I gotta admit, you are really a powerful thinker, and I gotta praise you for that. That's one thing I do agree, and I love the fact that you put certain things that I never thought of into perspective, which is really fascinating and interesting in itself. So yeah, I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. I gotta love this. I love this. What am I saying? I love this conversation, and hopefully, before we end this conversation, sadly, is that I hope I get to have a chance to have you back on the show, perhaps, and we get to have a conversation, round table conversation, or stuff like that, because it would be interesting to have a lot of people have a lot of perspectives here and there. That would be fascinating.
Mhm.
And to wrap this conversation off, of course, so, Rose, of course, I'm sure a lot of my listeners have been inspired and they would love to connect with you. How would they find you in social media? How do they find you there?
Oh, okay. So I guess I'll start with Talks of the New Normal, the one I'm doing now. So it's conversations with different people about different topics on how to live again in this new reality that we're in. So that's at Tales of New Normal. So Tales underscore of underscore new underscore normal on Instagram. But my personal account on Instagram is at Baroga Rose. Um, I think my name will be spelled right, so they'll see it. It's just Baroga and Rose. So yeah, that's it. I also have Twitter. It's also at Baroga Rose.
Awesome. Awesome. First of all, I want to thank my guest today, Rose Barroga. Phenomenal, phenomenal person. Um, the underlining word of the day is, of course, interesting, but second to that is change. And for those who are tuning in, I hope you have been transformed by the thoughts of other people's emotions and feelings. And I hope the story would act as a fuel for you to go out and change the world as it's changing. You also change your internals and build through that by the words of Rose herself. And an advice from me as well is that, take the conversations that we have in the Let's Talk series and push your dreams, make it happen. It's one of my favorite catchlines is let's make it happen. So yeah, I want to thank my guest. Thank you so much, Rose, for being a part of the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Folks, I hope you've been inspired. Cheers, and I will see you in the next episode.